In the middle of nowhere in West Texas reside some of the most beautiful aircraft ever built. Let's find out more about them in the hangar.
Chad, we're going to talk. You got to put your chin
Talking to the foam
like
ball.
a GA aircraft.
Like this?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're not gangster. We're not doing DJ work here.
Okay.
Chad, going out to your place, it is like the most unusual thing you wouldn't expect in the middle of West Texas, Breckenridge, Texas. There's hardly anything there. Great restaurant.
No, yeah, we got some places to eat.
Yeah, but why in the world is the home of some of the best Warbird restoration and rebuilding work done in West Texas at Ezell Aviation?
Well, back in the late 70s, there were some old men. Howard Pardue was one of them, Jimmy McMillan, and Bill Arnott, Buck Ridley, and they each had Corsair, B-25. We had 4 Corsairs based on the field.
Wow.
Wildcat, Bearcat, TBM, and a B-25, and that was all through the 80s. Those aircraft were there, and they needed somebody to do maintenance and restoration work, and my dad came out in 80 to do a restoration on a Wildcat and would make a trip to Texas, Breckenridge, and go back home to Florida where I'm from and where my dad was from, and it'd make a month in, month out, until the Wildcat was done. And then they had a Sea Fury that had ground looped. He did repair on that. And they convinced him to come in and just be a mechanic in-house, and it was a three-way partnership they started, built a nice hangar in the middle of the field, and Dad just did maintenance on all their aircraft because there were so many aircraft on the field to maintain. It was a on-the-clock, year-round job. He started going to air shows, flying airplanes with them. They ended up going to Reno. We did a aircraft that raced at Reno, a Sea Fury. Howard's Bearcat had another Sea Fury we had built. We built four different Sea Furies that had raced at
Rare
Reno.
Bear was one of those?
And in 13 through 15, we worked on Rare Bear for Rod Lewis. So, yeah, I think the first trip to Reno was in 88 with a Wildcat. Then it was the Bearcat, and then the Fury came on in the middle of the 90s. And Stu Dawson had a Sea Fury, and it would race. So there was 3 of them that went for several years. Every year, there's a whole gaggle from Breckenridge going to the races that we took care of, supported them basically. So there's just a lot going on in Breckenridge when it had something to do with Warbirds. They had a huge air show in the 80s and 90s, and
almost as big as Airventure here.
Almost, I think maybe it came afterwards. I'm not sure which was first, chicken or the egg.
They copied you.
Yeah, they copied it, It was just a different era back in the 80s for the Warbird industry. And it really turned into the business for the Warbird people in the 90s, and things changed and the air show kind of died out, or Howard basically stopped it. And so anyway, we just kept working. Dad started the business in 86, and we've moved into a new facility in 15 that is still in Breckenridge on the airport. And as Dad would say, we're still not done yet. So it's just still always have something to do. And my dad was a craftsman and loved building airplanes and was a great gentleman to work with and had a great reputation for being honest, and we try to keep the same reputation going. So.
Well, as I've talked to people in the industry, you mentioned the Ezell name and instant respect, and it's a name you guys have built well.
Well, as Mom would say, don't shame the name. So, yeah.
And I noticed he's not wearing his glasses, but he's had several pairs of Flying Eyes. We were at the Flying Eyes booth, and if you go to flyingeyesoptics.com, you can use our discount code, taking off all caps one word for 10% off. So make sure you do that because these things are amazing.
They're really great. No more headset headaches.
No more headset headaches. Also, Clemens Insurance, if you go to clemensinsurance.net, when I switched over to them for my insurance on my plane, he saved me over $1,000 right off the bat because the brokers actually go to the underwriters, go to bat for you. So if you want insurance and you need somebody on your side, check out clemensinsurance.net. Not just airplane insurance, any insurance, you can go there for them. So I just want to get that mentioned before we go on.
There'll be a small fee for my time waiting through that.
I know. We'll have to.
Have to bribe him later.
Yeah, we'll have to bribe him later. Well, let's play a game. Let's play the game of, let's see if we can stump Chad on information on warbirds.
Oh, okay.
You know, what's funny is that he's had, so I've done some filming at Ezell Aviation, and I did an Instagram post where I showed the plane, just a piece of the plane behind me, and said, hey guys, see if you can figure out which plane this is.
What's this?
I showed it to him. He's like, no, you're showing way too much. Just show like 3 inches of the fuselage.
Take a picture of a rivet and then go from there.
So I was, we were shooting around EAA Airventure, and we got into some areas where the public doesn't go. And sitting on a stand was this most incredible big engine, and they told me what it went into. I just sent him a picture. It was way too much of the picture. He instantly identified it. It goes into a super...
I didn't know it was a test for me.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it was not just for a Corsair. You're able to identify it as for a Super Corsair, blah, 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 blah. So, that's amazing. So let's try to stump you then.
J3 Cub.
Yeah.
Might actually stump
Cessna
you there.
210.
Oh, Bonanza. Oops.
Oh, he owns a Bonanza.
Oh, hey, another one. Great. What model?
V35.
Very good. Our friend that we flew down with is in a V35B. Yep.
Good airplane.
They are.
Not as good as a 210, but probably a better alternator.
Oh, I don't know about that, Dan. Don't know.
2 against 1, majority rules. Bees win.
So, I want to test your knowledge real quick here, because having hang with you, this is the test part. You've mentioned issues like with warbirds, and coming through the history of aviation, you've mentioned the issue of flutter. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what is flutter, and why was it a problem then, and why is it not so much a problem today?
Well, there's engineers that get a lot better description than mine. Mine's going to be a little West Texas-y.
Okay.
So
we'll expect that. I like how you set the expectations.
Yeah, I'm trying to lower the expectations. Yeah. So it's something that was not known in aviation until later on, as aircraft got over the 150 to 200 mile an hour bracket. There was a point in there when aircraft were getting fast enough that the simple design was encountering some more aerodynamic issues than they knew were aware. So balanced control surfaces became very critical after 200 mile an hour. And there's a video of a GB racer, and it's a black and white photo, and he's coming down to make a high-speed pass, and he just starts barrel rolling into the ground, and everybody wonders why. Well, what happened was there was an aileron flutter, so the air flowing over the aileron started a harmonic due to imbalance, and the harmonics just was so instantaneous that it just disintegrated the left wing. And Kermit Weeks has a really good video on YouTube where he has an engineer come in and they do a study on his GB racer, and it's all about that whole incident. And he explains flutter very well, a whole lot better than what I'm doing. And he puts test equipment on the wing, and they run it through, and it's actually just running an oscillation on the wing, and they're measuring the effects on the wing and the aileron assembly. And it's really interesting, a very long video. But all of the fighters in World War II, everything into the late 30s, 40s, they had to balance the control surfaces. That's why you see the big bob weight. So if you go look on the P-38, Wandina that's over there, you'll see on the elevator, there's like two big bullets that are counterbalances. And on the ailerons, the counterbalances are actually inside of the wing, and you have to have enough room for that to travel. But there's a load of weights all down that. And each aircraft designer had to figure out what was the best balance. And usually they'll just have enough weight for it to drop, and the tail surface goes up and the leading edge is down. And that usually gives them enough, there's a lot goes into the engineering. We do everything on an aircraft. When we build an aircraft, we go to the structural repair manual, the SRM, and it gives guidance on how that component should be balanced due to repair in the field. And sometimes you can get good documentation in the drawings, It depends on the manufacturer. Some are better than others. But we always look in the SRM, and if it's fabric covered, like a T6, a Mustang rudder, you have to go through and make sure you have your weight set before you put the fabric on it. And sometimes you have to do all the fabric work and then check it again after paint. So it's a critical component. And so I've seen at Reno, flutter if the trim tab on a rudder on a Mustang has 1/4 inch slop, a little too much slop, it'll just get into a harmonic vibration and it'll just disintegrate the trim tab and it'll fall off. And you could go to Jimmy Leeward in the Ghost, and that was mainly attributed to an elevator that had a little bit too much play. There's a lot of things you could say about that whole deal. They put a lot of angle of incidence and adjustments to go that speed on the Mustang, and he hadn't done a lot of that I'm aware of, and so he had to run a lot more trim to get the airplane where it was less stick weight, so he's not pulling the stick a lot, doing the over 400 miles an hour.
Wow.
And that much load on the surface and getting into turbulence just generated and you can hear it. You
Wow.
could hear it. I heard it, I was there, and you could hear the buzz, and it just, I guess you could say it was like an A10 gun going off, the
Wow.
minigun, but it's like a really sharp buzz, really quick, and that's typically what a flutter sounds like. But there's a lot of stories, a lot of different people, aerobatic pilots in situations. But there's a lot of information on it. Anybody building an airplane that's going to be, relatively quick, even RV4, you really pay attention to the balancing of the control surfaces. Really important.
Well, and speaking of the learning curve from the 1930s, 1940s aircraft design with the aircraft getting faster, and you also mentioned the P-38, wasn't that about the time they learned about Mach tuck as well with the P-38?
Well, that was more when the aircraft were getting over 400 mile an hour, especially into the 40s. Of course, the P-38 was a 39 was the first flight. It was a 30s model design, believe it or not. And the Bearcat went through it, and of course they would go to altitude and do a dive test. And then we realized they couldn't pull the stick back because of the compression loading on the airframe. They started adding dive recovery flaps on everything. P-38 got it, the Bearcat got it. The Mustang had a completely different wing design, and the laminar flow wing on a Mustang moved the shock wave to where they had better pitch control and they could recover.
Interesting.
But there are little things they would do. There are counterweights they put on the controls in the aircraft for the load of the elevator. Little things they do to make it easier on the pilots, but it was something that they were learning about, and then they had to figure out how to get through that.
And so those recovery flaps, those are ones that had like the little Swiss cheese holes in them that you see?
No, not all
Those
of them. On the P-38, it was basically added to the bottom of the wing, and it was just an extra little bitty door, and it would just dump down and put some drag on the whole airframe.
It was automatic?
Hold the mic to your mouth.
Was that automatic with the spear?
No, they had
to
select
deploy
it.
it?
They had to select it. Of course, here's one interesting one for you. I was unaware of this. I just saw a Stuka in a shop that's being built for a museum, and there was a hydraulic actuator in the middle. It's separated, demated. There's a hydraulic actuator where the vertical would sit, underneath the vertical. The vertical's not on it. And I asked the maintenance guy, I said, what is this actuator for? He says, that's for dive recovery. I said, what do you mean dive recovery? He said, well, when the bomb would drop, this big arm would swing out. When the bomb would release, that would actuate this cylinder hydraulically, and it would move the elevator to recover.
Oh, wow.
On its own. He said, because typically the pilot would black out.
Oh my God.
And if he
that's
blacked
nice.
out, the aircraft would continue recovery until he got conscious again.
Oh, so you're
I
trusting
said,
okay.
Yeah, so I was like, I never knew that, and I haven't studied a Stuka. I said, was this a late edition or early? He said, no, this is an early airplane. This was something they engineered into the airplane. So that's just German engineering. So I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that know that, but seeing it in an airplane, so what is this? A hydraulic actuator middle of a vertical? There wasn't hydraulically controlled. Well, it was an assist for recovery. So it wasn't due to the speed of the dive, because they wanted the Stuka the dump flaps and go relatively slow so he could sight in the target like a hill diver had a lot of. That's why you're seeing the holes in all of those dive brakes.
Okay.
Is to get the speed down so that he could have time to aim. Of course, he's getting shot at
Right,
too.
yeah.
Right, yeah, as you slow down.
Yeah.
It's
It's a
him,
two-
you're a little bit longer.
He's not really going to get, if he was clean diving with nothing, he might, I don't know if you could get a hill diver in mock tuck. You could if you got high enough, you might have it. So a Bearcat had a tendency to mock tuck where actually the nose would get heavy and want to tuck down. And when Lyle Shelton was racing Rare Bear, there was instances with air temp and conditions where the stick would get really heavy. They say like the stick was like in concrete. You could not move the stick.
Wow.
And it would just kind of want to tuck. So your CG of your aircraft will affect that. There's a lot of things. And if you're taking a Bearcat and putting a huge engine on it and you're going way over 500 mile an hour, you're really getting into no man's land.
So were there actually conditions where you're like, oh, the temperature, can't really fly this? Like actually wouldn't fly because of the conditions?
Well, they were going for a speed record or racing at Reno, and that
Right.
was the situation. But yeah, they got aware of some situations they had to really be paying attention. Exactly, yeah.
Interesting.
All right, you've worked on so many interesting aircraft, historical aircraft. What are the top 1, 2, 3 aircraft that you've ever worked on?
I'm sure it's hard, but they're all cool in their own way.
They're all
right?
your children.
Yeah.
There's never a favorite, but
some
yeah.
are children, some are bitter mistresses. You know, it's the Red Bull 38. We worked on that back in the early 2000s, and it was me, my dad, and brother.
Yeah.
And that one was, I have to say, that one was probably one of the most fun because we all were on it together as a team. Me and my brother had kind of come to age. You know, I started stripping paint back in the 1900s, as out of high school. And, nobody wants to be that. My brother went to a machine shop, went to work, so he came in as a machinist. So he did the smart route. And then I ended up painting airplanes. And so I have come with a Mustang years ago in the 90s that I did a lot of work on and painted it. And we've done Corsairs and others. But the P-38 was when me and my brother and my dad really worked hard together on it, doing a lot of fabric, from one end to the other. And it was the last project my brother was a part of in the shop. Then he moved to Florida and went to work with another shop, Gary Norville. And so then it was just me and Dad. So I think the Red Bull 38 was probably the most fun. And they were really good to work with. The people we worked with, a lot of the senior people are all gone from the company. The pilot has passed away, the owner has passed away. But, they were shipping 7 cases of Red Bull a month.
That's what kept you guys
They started
going.
with like one, and they said, "How's it going?" I said, "Well, that only lasted a week." So it just kept growing. And so it was a lot of fun working with those guys. It was a fun project. Their attitude was, "We're not worried about the price tag. We trust you, but we want it as fast as you can get it done, but we want it nice." And that was a request. And then, they flew us to Austria. We went to, had a soccer game with them. Went to a soccer, they were just really good to us, and appreciative. And
well, that airplane itself had an interesting history, right? Wasn't that a racer?
Yeah.
Wasn't it White Lightning before?
That one it was a racer. It flew for Ranger Oil as a racer back in the Cleveland days. And then Lefty Gardner raced it, at Reno. So it's got a really colorful history. It does, yeah.
That's great.
Did it serve in World War II?
I don't believe it had any combat history. It was just one of the aircraft that was always in the States.
Yeah. A lot of the ones that survived.
Most of the 38s
trainers
never
or
really made it back
post-war.
to the States.
Yeah.
There are some veterans now, but they've been recovered. Like Wandina is a veteran, and it was recovered and brought to the States. So,
Yeah, and I've seen Wandina. It's amazing.
yeah.
All right. Well, you just kind of blew through. You said in passing the word I wanted to hear more about, Corsair. So,
Of course, we've done the first Corsair I worked on was the Dash 5 for a Lone Star Flight Museum, and it's still there. And Annie Moe. So that one was a lot of fun. But the Brewster was probably one that was really unique, and we had a lot of fun with. We did.
Well, because Brewster got such a bad reputation, right?
Yeah. So I've got a good friend, Kevin Grantham, that did a lot of research into Brewster, and we were really looking for photos of any Brewster aircraft, because the one we were doing was the one Lex Crowley had recovered, and we were doing it for a museum that's now in Colorado Springs. And so when we had the aircraft at the shop, we'd always heard the stories of all Brewster was the worst producer of aircraft. Brewster produced aircraft in 43 and 44, but they only did for a year. They started in June and ended in June or July at some point. And the Navy came in and shut them down. And it's an interesting story of why. And Kevin Grantham found a secretary, and she pretty much fed him a lot of information of what was going on. She was a secretary for Brewster. But he also found some documentation. He found a Pax River report on a Brewster the Navy did, and it was like 40 serial numbers off of our airplane.
Oh, wow.
And it came out like the month before. So Brewster was more expensive, but their quality was top notch. I've seen a lot of Goodyear airplanes, and there's a Goodyear blimp here, and I hope they're not listening. But the Goodyear airplanes that I've been in, and I've been in multiple airplanes, and I've also talked to some other builders, and they've agreed with me. They were not the prettiest in craftsmanship. And some of the metalwork and all. I mean, they built good flying airplanes. But there was a lot of heartache with Brewster over the union within the company.
Oh, okay.
But they built the airplane we were looking at was a beautiful airplane. And actually, what's interesting is the Flying Heritage Collection, this F8C cam, FG has a Brewster center section.
Okay.
And it came from Brewster the summer they shut it down, is my theory, because it had Brewster's markings all inside of it that were original to the airframe, because it was an untouched airframe when we restored it for the museum. And so there's two center sections flying around.
Wow.
Of course, we rebuilt the Brewster and put a lot of effort into making it look exactly like it did in its era, because you could still see the markings on the fuselage. L69 was on it. And we knew its history, and the photos showed us the interior really accurate. They were really excellent It was a documented airplane that Brewster had produced that Pax River documented, and they had a lot of reports on operations they had done with the airplane. And it had they were doing carrier landings and stuff that wasn't holding up. They sent pictures. Now there is a service bulletin that Vought put out, and they pulled parts. And they had 3 aircraft. They had a Vought aircraft, a Brewster aircraft, and a Goodyear aircraft. And they were trying to interchange parts between all 3 aircraft, and there was a service bulletin about that. And there's not a whole lot of parts that would interchange off the Brewster. So there's some, but that's because it's a different plant, and it depends on the standards. And so they were there are a lot of books that were put out trying to keep the same standards between all builders that Vought put out. VBG book,
Right.
Vought, Brewster, Goodyear.
Well, and I guess Brewster also took a hit on their reputation because of the poor old Buffalo.
Yeah, well, it was a 30s design, and they were up against superior pilots and superior aircraft. We were just behind.
Yeah.
And you look at the Wildcat. Midway tells a pretty big story.
Yeah.
And when the Hellcat came out, Midway, they lost a lot of good pilots after Midway, and that it's a historical change of the war. We became more of an aggressor because they had lost so many good pilots and airplanes, and then we were coming in with good aircraft. But, those guys were in their first real conflict, and they were in the firepower was not very good. They didn't have 50s. I think they're 30 calibers.
I thought they had 50s.
Not on the Brewster. I think it was a lighter.
On the Brewster Buffalo, yeah.
The Buffalo.
So, it was, none came back. So
We
we'll
don't
sell
have
them
any
so
of
we're going to
those.
sell them to Finland.
Great.
We'll take care of those. We'll sell them. There are my dad always wanted to do a Brewster Buffalo because there weren't any out there, and he always wanted to just do one. And there are 3 projects, I think, in Norway or Finland, and they have one on display with their projects there. And I said, well,
Really?
maybe we could do one, but we never did really.
Oh.
We always had something else to do.
Yeah.
You know.
Your favorite plane of all time is what?
That's probably another hard
Oh,
one.
that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I can answer it.
Can you? Yeah, but you haven't worked on what I've worked on, Dan.
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know. The jury's still out.
Okay, all right.
The next
I
one?
kind of like what I've got a Stagwing, a Fly, and then the
Right.
Bonanza,
Okay.
and they're really good airplanes. I have a lot of respect for the Bonanza. I can get in and always get where I need to go. It's always there.
Nice and
always
fast.
reliable, and it's fast. Yeah,
It is.
the Stagwing is expensive to be fast.
Yeah.
You're gonna really squeeze some dollars out of that thing to get some speed.
Yeah.
But it's so pretty.
It is. It's cool to show up in a Stagwing.
Little
Yeah.
Art Deco
You're a rock
going.
star when you pull up with
Oh,
a gas
yeah.
pump.
All right. Well, Chad, thanks so much for coming and sharing about the Warbirds and the history and stuff. And it's really eye-opening and interesting to me.
I finally got good at holding the mic to my mouth,
Finally
and now
did.
we're
So
done.
now that
We can
we've
hear you
trained
now.
you, it's time to
yeah,
end.
yeah, that's the way it goes.
All right, thank you guys for watching, and don't forget our sponsors like Marshall Protective Services, NPSProtects.com, Personal Protection Elevated. Do you know some of our sponsors?
Oh, 67 Designs.
67D.com. They make camera, cell phone, tablet mounts for your plane, your car, your boat. They're all made in America. They're great products. 67D.com.
And Z Vision, XE Vision.
XEVision.com. They make landing and taxi lights. I have some in Lola, my 210, and I have people on the radio say, wow, those are great lights. And Colton Mortgage, ColtonTakingOff.com. If you need a residential mortgage, it's owned by a pilot, like all our sponsors are. So help support the aviation industry. And thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
In the hangar.